and welcome to Why Make, where we talk with makers from different disciplines about what inspires them to make, with your hosts Rob Helmkamp
and Eric Wolken. If you'd like to learn more about the makers we interview on Why Make, please go to our website, why-make.com.
And please help support the Why Make podcast and Why Make Productions by making a tax-deductible donation to us on Fractured Atlas.
Fractured Atlas is our new non-profit fiscal sponsor, which allows us to access a wide range of funding possibilities, including funding available only for nonprofits.
Visit fundraising.fracturedatlas.org/the-y-make-project or go to the Donate to Why Make page on why-make.com.
This is our final episode for 2023. Our fifth season of the Why Make podcast. Through these almost 60 episodes, we have enjoyed talking with artists of all stripes, from woodworkers to jewelry makers to authors, about what makes them tick and what inspires them. We hope you have enjoyed listening as much as we have loved making this podcast. To listen or re-listen to the entire archive of episodes, please take a trip over to the website, why-make.com. And we're excited about what lies ahead. In 2024, we are going to change the formula a little and sharpen the focus of the podcast and produce more video content. We are also going to see Rob step more into the background.
I have had a lot of fun over the last 5 years, and instead of making a sophisticated attempt to do a double backward somersault through a fiery hoop and exit stage left, I'm going to take a step into the background of Why Make and buckle into an editing and production role. Read, comma police. With the intention of spending more time in my studio working on a new series of meditation chairs, some furniture, and a little bit of commission woodworking.
As Why Make has evolved over the past 5 years, I have become more and more fascinated with the process of creativity, and I have been trying to find a way to help me and you, our listeners, get deeper into just how the process works for a wide range of artists. This has led me to devote the next season of the Why Make podcast to a project I am calling Mind of a Maker. In Mind of a Maker, we join artists in their studios to look at very specific pieces of work or a series of pieces and try to understand what went into choosing an idea, how that idea evolved into a work or a final product of some kind, and finally, how that idea impacted the artist personally and their work moving forward. And because we want to be able to visualize as well as hear about the creative process, we will also be accompanying each episode with a short video that will be available on the Why Make YouTube channel.
I'm really excited to see how you bring the 6th season of Why Make to life, Eric. I will definitely be listening and watching and producing and editing.
Thanks, Rob, and I hope all of you will join us for the next season of the Why Make podcast as we explore the mind of a maker. And please help the Why Make project make this new chapter possible with your tax-deductible gift by going to the donate page on our website, why-make.com.
On episode 57 of Why Make, we talk with Brad Reed Nelson, a Glenwood Springs, Colorado woodworker, furniture maker, and product designer creating magical pieces made from metal and wood. Brad, aka BRN, and his better half Anne run Board by Design, a functional design company making such brightly colored amazingness as Knuckles, The Good Pot, Elefunction, Blokkey, Bling Pong tables, and the steadfast Winsorrondack chair.
We talk with Brad about his years in school and learning about life and making with the likes of Wendell Castle, Garry Knox Bennett, Paul Sasso, Sam Maloof, and Gail Fredell.
Brad also reminds us about the importance and necessity of community, collaboration, listening and communication, fostering relationships, and being vulnerable, and how these all pile up to create the mountain from which every single person is made.
So join us as we lean in and get all twisted up in Brad Reed Nelson's humble sense of humor and wicked sense of design. And we would like to welcome Brad Reed Nelson. And is it required that we go with all three? Can you be Brad Nelson or Nelson Reed?
Welcome to Why Make, Brad. Reed.
Nelson. BRN.
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 Or Brad.
Or
whatever makes you happy.
Right.
Nice to see you both.
BRN, welcome to the Why Make
Thank you.
podcast.
I'm very glad to be here.
Right.
You guys do a great job.
And this is kind of radio land, but the podcast listeners can't see it, but Brad is wearing Why Make swag. He's got the shirt on.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty stoked.
Yeah.
I got the hookup.
You got the hookup, and I'll say that that's such a high quality sticker on the front. It's so stiff, it'll help you stand up if you're having a bad day.
It can also help me drop 5 pounds when I sweat, so that's good too.
So, Brad, we start off every episode. We ask the why make question. So, what was your first experience or memory of making something?
So that's fun and easy. I always remember this one. We lived in Hickory, North Carolina. And back in 1976, they made furniture in Hickory, North Carolina. And Rob, you know what I mean? Eric, you probably know what I mean.
Yes.
But my father would go to the factories and get all this kindling wood. But the kindling wood was all this ornate trim from kind of more colonial style furniture, things like that from Broyhill or Kincaid or one of the factories, and come home with these little blocks, 4, 6, 8 inches with all this little detail. And then I had this dream of having this carriage for my bike that looked like I had seen this carriage on the back of a Harley with a chopper, where it had it almost looked funeral related, but it was very ornate. And I dreamed of making this object. So what I would do is I'd lay it out in rows and kind of try to complete a composition. And then I would glue it onto cardboard because I didn't know how to create joinery between those pieces. And the domino machine hadn't come out yet. It would have been handy. I would then cut it off the cardboard and have these kind of frames that I was imagining that I was going to create a box out of, and then this chariot and, this seating area inside. But I'd play with this stuff constantly.
And where did it go from there? Did you come from a family with an arts background?
So my dad had a shop teaching degree first, and then he went back and got an electrical engineering degree. And when we were living all of my life, he worked for General Electric, and we moved every 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so we were in Hickory for 2.5 years. So we were always moving and doing something in the new house. So a downstairs bar that he had all this wormy chestnut someone had given him, and I'd always be helping him. And I liked the making part, but my dad was not a very patient person. And so if you couldn't go upstairs and find that tool within a short period of time, it wasn't always fun helping him make stuff. But I did help him a lot, and I did find a love for woodworking. And, he had an assortment of radial arm saws and other tools that we could get the job done with. And then thinking about I listened to your Kim interview today. Mm-hmm. I had to go up to Aspen, and I thought on the drive back down, I was listening to that and baking. Always baked with my mom, and always loved being in there and just getting your hands into stuff. And, a lot of times I baked from a box, but as a kid, that sure seems like baking.
Yeah.
And then drawing. I was a constant drawer. I drew motorcycles and cars, and I still have a thing for cars and motorcycles and other design. I love product design, and I love the way things go together. And I've had friends say that they love fine art, but they don't love automobile design. And I can convince them within about 10 minutes why they do love it. I'm like, have you ever looked inside of a Bentley and seen how beautiful and opulent and how well designed? I said, it's like that trickle down thing that happens in design where, the very highest level, and then it eventually permeates all of car design. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Devil Wears Prada.
I have not.
Watched it with my daughter years ago, but there's a scene where she asked her what color blue she's wearing, and she says, I don't know, it's blue. And she said, well, that was a blue that, that Chanel used 10 years ago or 6 years ago, and it's taken this long for Target now to have it. And it's everything informs everything.
Right. So did you think that you were going to be a maker growing up? Did you have an aha moment where you realized this was going to be a career or a passion?
I had an aha life because I'm dyslexic, and the only class that I ever excelled in and that ever got along with the teacher was the art teacher, always. And so in Kansas City, the art teacher and I got along, so well. And for the yearbook, one of my drawings ended up on the back of the yearbook in third grade. And she didn't tell me. And not completely understanding editing at that time, she didn't use the whole drawing. She used about 2/3, but the way she used it, I didn't immediately recognize it. And she said, well, look at it for a minute. And then I was like, that seems really familiar. And she goes, yeah, that's your drawing. So the only time I was ever at peace, honestly, was generally in an art class.
You struggled through everything else.
I was a pretty bad student, and in 6th grade they finally diagnosed that I had dyslexia, and it was just not. I'm 55, so it took a while to. Education was not catching up to that at that time. And my mom, of all the things, and one of the reasons I use my middle name would be because my mom fought for me educationally. Always made sure that my teachers knew I was trying. She's like, no matter what, you say he's not, but I see him at home. I know he's trying. And so she was definitely a great advocate for me, really fortunate in that way. So, so art was always that was the epiphany. And then I liked 3D art, but it was always clay. And a lot of the schools I went to, we did get to play with clay. But that was my 3D stuff. And I still have this one head I did that I really like. I'm always curious if the teacher did the lips. The lips are really good. And you know how sometimes the teacher would lean in. I'm like, I wonder if they did that or I did that. No recollection.
You bend this and move that. And there you go.
yeah. And pinch that. But then, vocational things were still happening in school. So then when we were up in Andover, Massachusetts, there was a metals, not a small metals, but an industrial metals class. And you learned how to bend stuff and cold fasten things. And I made a really ugly candle holder that was a kind of an S bent out of some 1 inch by 1/4 inch, put on a bender. Then you made these 2 flower petal-like objects. Then you made 2 little cups that held the candle, and you riveted through it. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then there was a shop class, and I don't know if I ever turned something to completion, but I did jam a tool into a spinning piece of wood, which still call it wood jamming till today. You guys want to do some wood jamming?
I think the next thing that comes after that is wood flying, usually.
So you were about 16, 17, 18.
That was in junior high. Junior high was the wood. Junior high was the wood shop and the metal shop, and that was
okay.
Both,
so that was younger.
That was both. So that was both up in Andover, Massachusetts. Then we moved to North Carolina, to Charlotte. So back to North Carolina. And
I know about the moving thing. I was a Navy brat, so I had every 3 years we were gone. So
I always said GE was the other military because people always said the military, and I'd say the other military. And then
so Charlotte for a while, and
Charlotte, South Mecklenburg. The art teacher there was great, Mrs. Prose, and she had batik and all kinds of things. And the first day I met her, she said, "What's your favorite color?" And I said, "Plaid." And she said, "Oh, we're going to get along just fine." And, where every other teacher was like, "You're a smart ass," she was like, "You're clever. Great." So art saved my life. Let's be honest. Cool.
So at what point do you head off to Sasso land, and do you meet Paul Sasso and you do your undergraduate at Moorhead, correct?
Fun facts. Here we go.
Yes, fun facts. Yes, fill it in. I could have it all wrong.
So I worked at a surf shop, and I sold cool. The guy that owned the surf shop had like some of the more unique companies that are out there, like Jimmy Z's. I don't know if you remember Jimmy Z's stuff, but it was
Jimmy Z. Oh, those Velcro pants! I loved them, man.
Yeah, they were amazing.
And I had Vision Streetwear, Jimmy Z's, 17th Street Surf Shop from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
17th Street, nice. WRV.
So we go to WRV to buy our Airwalk, 17th Street.
Oh yeah. So then there was and then Schroff. Do you remember Schroffwear?
No, I don't.
Schroffwear was like a little more out of the box. Their fabrics were really cool. Their textiles were cool. So I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I really loved the idea. And I had this idea for using Fastex clips in, what fast X clips are, of course, I
Right.
hope. But I had this idea for using like in a Jimmy Z style, but overalls and things all with fast X clips. And I thought, oh man, the world would be ready for this. It'd be cool, and it'd be kind of a modern take on a traditional object. And but I was such a shit student that I couldn't convince myself to go off to fashion design school. The good schools would have been in LA or New York, Milan. And I was a 2.7 high school student, and there was I couldn't see a path into an internship or something, and where with furniture I could, and especially in North Carolina. At first I just floundered. I got kicked out of college a couple times at Lee's McRae College in the mountains of North Carolina. Lead 'em astray, last chance Lee's, skis McRae. I got kicked out of that school twice.
Oh,
Went
twice?
back to Charlotte.
A repeat offender.
For nothing, being in the girls' dorm 10 minutes after curfew, things like that. Nothing notable. But I went back to Charlotte, and I was working in a wood shop, waiting tables at night. Not happy. I was in a cabinet shop, not happy. There was no joy or fun or no imagination in it. And waiting tables at this really cool restaurant called Cafe Flavors. And Brent Skidmore came in with a couple other of his students.
Right. Yeah. Brent.
And it was this first semester there, and they were singing his praises, and they said, "Hadn't you want to make furniture?" And I was like, "I have been." And I described everything, and they were like, "Well, get over here." So I started taking classes at the Central Piedmont Community College, and Brent was, fun and imaginative, and he was only a couple years older than me. So as he got me into making furniture, I got him into rock climbing, and I had a boat. We water skied all the time, and we became very good friends. And I was headed off to California College of Arts and Crafts, and my sister lived out in San Francisco. She had moved out there to work for a spree, and I was going to live with her and take classes at CCAC back when the word craft wasn't dirty. And the woman running the program, can't remember her name, doesn't matter, never knew her, kind of blew the program up, and everybody left. So Hayami Arakawa was there, and this guy Matt Saunders was there. All these, and Hayami runs MIT's makers space now, Fab Lab, wonderful maker person himself. But they all left, and Brent caught wind of it and said, "I just talked to Paul Sasso, and he's got a kid coming from Santa Cruz to get his degree here. He left CCAC. Apparently it's in shambles. I have to go out for a alumni show this summer. Do you want to come and see the place?" And I said, "Sure." So in my head, I'm like, man, I went from living in San Francisco, excited to leave Charlotte to go to a much bigger city and a much cool, that's in the early 90s. San Francisco is still very cool. And now I'm going to go to a dry county in Southern Kentucky. I was having a hard time getting super pumped up about that. And I'm like 23, so I'm already an older undergraduate. But I went out for the summer, and the show was good. Paul Sasso had a party. All the faculty was there. I smoked marijuana with most of the faculty, not realizing I was going to be a student of theirs that fall, and decided, this is going to be great. So, transferred to Murray State University. Paul was amazing. He's my kind of teacher. He leans in when he needs to, and he steps away and gives you a lot of space to find yourself. And that's where I was in my life. That doesn't work for everybody, but it worked very well for me at the time. Then there was a guy, Steve Bishop, that ran sculpture. He was great. He was a well of information. It was a great program. It was hard to live there. Talking to either virgins, telling you how they're saving their, whatever for this perfect moment, or people telling you about their world experiences because they'd been to Louisville and Memphis. Was hard sometimes.
In the same day?
Probably. I mean, if you drove fast, yes, and you didn't get out of your car. But Paul was from what he calls the Tijuana of Canada, Windsor, which is right across from Detroit, and was very influenced by Detroit Motown music. He had traveled a lot. He was super fun. His wife was super fun. We became good friends because they were looking for people to talk to as much as we were looking for people to talk to. So spent a lot of evenings at their house baking bread and hanging out with them. and got a great education. And, and Paul is just a blast to be around. And he's just, he's irreverent. He's kind. He's, he's just a good mentor. And, and I admire his work so much. And, then I got to know Maggie growing up and see her acting in like 7th grade plays and stuff. So it was a nice time to be there. Like I really know them. And I did not know Sandy had passed away until, just this spring I found out, and I was very sad to hear that. So such a cool lady, and I knew a lot of people that knew Sandy from Pinland because she had been up there. So do you remember, Rob, do you remember Bradley Walters at Anderson Ranch? He had hung out with Sandy when Sandy was up at Pinland. So he had a whole different experience about Sandy Sasso and how great she was. So great maker too.
It's so funny to hear different perspectives from different people about the same person.
Oh yeah.
And of course, Maggie was on the podcast 2 years ago.
That's what I thought.
And she is a chip off the old block. She is she is hysterical. She is hysterical, but incredibly warm and a super intelligent maker. I mean, as Paul says it, I do believe he talks about the intelligence of the hands, and obviously she inherited that from her dad. But Paul was I
like that. And
this is the interesting thing. Getting back on track, Paul Sasso is a very quirky maker.
Oh yeah,
he is how did Paul's quirkiness influence you? Or was he so hands-off he just allowed you to develop in the way you wanted to?
I think for Paul, for what I love about Paul's work is that it embodies so much humor and intelligence, but so much craft. How sometimes the Woody woodworkers of the world that want to crawl under something, see how it's put together. And when you start to take apart a Paul piece, you're pretty flabbergasted on how well constructed and how elaborately constructed. And I love that about his work. I also don't love making things like that. I've made things very tight in a way that is slow and I needed to know I had that in me, but I also love figuring out ways to put things together in a very honest and quick way that has integrity. But I think what I really got from Paul was humor. I already had humor in my work a little bit, and I had done this table and chair that was called Sitting on Your Uvula, and it looked like a chair and table with just 50 uvulas on it, people at home, I just stuck my finger in my mouth. He got that, and then we just connected. So the first assignment was a piece from a book that you'd always admired, not the book you admired, a piece in a book that you'd always admired that piece. And it was a Disney book I had since I was a kid. And it was a lot of the watercolor stills before they went to production. And it was Pinocchio and it was the Goldfish Bowl table. And I had always loved it. And it's a small piece, very ornate. It's got carving in it. It's very big, kind of, over, Kimberly Winkle used it today. I can't say it, but I liked how she described something. But it was humorous. And when I showed it to Paul and said, "This is what I'm going to riff off of," he goes, "Oh my God, that's one of my favorite pieces in a book ever." And I think, that was like week one. And I was like, yeah, we're going to get along just fine. I think Paul, he just knew how to say, he just knew how to give a word or a meaning or a nudge at the right time. And he knew when to step back and let me flounder. And, but the thing is, Paul and I are really similar is when I was in school, I'd be in my studio at 8 and I'd be in my studio at midnight. And I just was there all day long. I just have, the fever for making, and just, there was a sense that at that time in my life that if I didn't make it, it was gone. And that I just had to be there. Now I work in my head. I asked you guys, Rob reached out a while back and I said, I'm not ready because we have spent 4 years building this studio. and just getting it dialed. And we were financially so over our head, and it just took so much to finally lock it down and be comfortable. And now there's been ideas. I had a solo show, and immediately in August, and immediately broke ground on this shop in August, 4.5 years ago. And, and just had to suppress all these new ideas. Yeah. And so, or not suppress or store or forget or lose or whatever, sometimes getting them onto paper. But there was 4 or 5 things that have been in my head that I was like, I got to get a few of these out before I talk to you, because when you ask me why I make, I better know why I make. I'm like, it better be because I'm making stuff. Or as Paul would say, get out there and make shit.
It's really interesting. So many of the makers that we've talked to are all actively still making. I don't think we've searched out anybody who's like, quote unquote, like retired from making. Cause I don't think any of the people like that gravitate towards what we're doing stop doing it. It's this disease that has no cure. Right.
Well, I jokingly said, I run a shop with 3 people that work for me, and I've always worked with people to make things. And I want to talk about that. I want to make sure we cover that a little bit. But when he said, I showed him the shirt today, and he goes, why do you make? And I said, because the world's a better place when I make shit. And I really believe that. That's not like my stuff's better. It might just mean that it keeps me from killing people.
Yeah. I mean, it could have a lot of different meanings.
But I do believe I have something to say visually that others do not. Yeah. And that I have something inside me that hasn't been seen. And if I don't make it, it doesn't get seen. And I don't think AI is going to get ahead of me.
No, I don't. And it's always like, I've always said that the stuff that I make, or I want to make things that I've never seen before. And that's just kind of how I approach everything. It's, seeing so many people make derivative things, I'm like, that's cool. You can do that. And I know a lot of people feel that that's an easy way to express themselves, make this table, that table, pour epoxy resin, make this Nakashima off or whatever. That may be a step to something else. That may be all that they want to do. I realized within myself, like you are, the same way. It's like, I want to make the shit that's coming out of me, that's coming out of my heart that I've never seen. So it's, a lot of people approach it differently. And,
I think, you said something, it's impossible to not amalgamate things into your work. Mm-hmm. It's the same with musicians and so forth.
It's a collective consciousness,
It is. We take on information, visual information, and we do mash it up. And there's no way you can't say, and then of course we're affected by, I've spent, 100 hours with Garry Knox Bennett in my life. Mm-hmm. And I have sat in his studio and watched him make, and I have gone upstairs when he was getting ready for a lamp show what was the great gallery in New York, something Pierce Gallery, Joseph Gallery.
Oh, Peter Joseph. Peter Joseph's Gallery, right.
So the Peter Joseph Gallery. He was getting ready for 100 lamp show there. And it was like when I first met him, and I went upstairs, and there is literally 100 table lamps upstairs, and that he's made in like 6 months. Yeah. And amazing. Just to see the speed and the veracity and the confidence to make, where you trust your decisions emphatically and don't waver, and also know that if you don't love it all, you'll work it out in the next one too. Because they'd be riffing off each other, and you could almost, if someone could have said it started here and went here, you'd be like, oh yeah, I see the progression,
see that arc.
Yeah, it was so fun. And then to work with Gail and see how I've been using metal a lot in my work. I'd always use metal and wood in my work, but to see,
and I'll mention that's Gail Fredell. So for the people that do not know who Gail is,
you should. Her work is genius.
Yeah, her work.
I believe her to be one of America's best furniture makers.
I emphatically agree with that, Brad. I mean BRN. Sorry.
BRN.
And if you don't know her work, partially it's because that's how hard it is to get your work seen sometimes, and the world forgets.
Shame on the world.
You know, you can go back, but you can go back and find woodworking and woodwork magazine and stuff, and you can always find Gail pieces. And
oh yeah,
but her way to integrate metal and wood, I think, is really special, and I think it impacted me. I think Brent Skidmore's silliness impacted me, but I also, you know, I always think Charles and Ray Eames for their understanding of materials, their breadth of work, but their videos and their videography, you know, like I love that there was no fear of what medium they went into, and that, you know, so I do love studio furniture makers, but I'm also very much a product designer,
right?
And you know,
and I think it's fascinating that we're going down this road that's really talking about why we make, and have it be more than just an interview process. It's really hard just through the medium of a conversation really to get at the heart of the matter.
Interesting.
I think there are a lot of reasons why people make, but I think for the vast majority of us, some of the main motivations are you have an idea in your head that has to get out. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I don't think anybody gets in this profession looking for notoriety. I mean, some people have gotten a lot of notoriety, but I think it's a byproduct of the process of being excited about making shit. And then there are some people that just make stuff for the notoriety and their work reflects it, and we won't go down that road, because I think making derivative work isn't necessarily a bad thing for somebody's own self-worth or somebody's own sense of the magic of making. It's just not where we come from as makers.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with somebody making the umpteenth millionth derivative Sam Maloof chair, or
just don't market it. Don't market the damn thing.
Right. I mean, you know, I remember in my younger years going up to people at shows that were making George Nakashima knockoffs and basically going, you know, you can't do that. And their answer would always be why. And I was going, because it's disrespectful. And then they'd go, why? And then I'd get really frustrated and upset and just walk away. I was like, well, you know,
it's like being in an art critique and saying to someone, you know, it has this and this in it, and them saying, I don't know their work. And you'd say, well, it's still your fault. You have to know their work. It's your job to inform yourself.
Right.
And it's your to be able to defend your work. And if you're knocking someone off and you don't know it, it's just as bad as knocking off somebody when you do know it.
Right. I mean, when you knock off the Conway chair and don't know it, it's either 10,000 monkeys typing Shakespeare, or you've seen it and you didn't know what it was.
Right.
But
you know, it frustrated Sam. You know, I mean, we talked about that a lot, and there would be people. You know, Rob, did you assist Sam in one of the weekend workshops? So.
No.
Was he had passed by then? Had he passed by then? Okay.
Yeah, I'd never met Sam.
Okay. So,
and for those that don't know, the three people that don't know, we're talking about Sam Maloof.
Right. And I actually was there when he was getting ready to teach one of the workshops. And
cool.
And there was always a huge crowd of people that really wanted to learn the Sam Maloof technique.
Yeah. And 95% of those people wanted to go back to their own shop and make one for themselves, because they couldn't afford a $15,000 the Cote de Rocker or whatever.
Right.
But there were always a few people in the crowd that actually had a company based on Sam. And I was there one time when he called one of the guys out, you know, and you're just like, it's such a funny thing, because it's a hero worship, but it's also, they were there a little bit to do the reconnaissance work. And, you know, there was a family out of Texas that marketed themselves and called themselves the Maloof Rocker. And, you know, he sued them and they dropped the name, but still. And the thing about Sam is you can't knock that thing off, because no one had a sense of line like him. You know, his background in calligraphy is what transferred into his furniture design, and you couldn't knock that off.
And his extremely dangerous technique on the bandsaw. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people lost thumbs
over trying to make the Maloof backsplats and
Yeah, you can't mimic someone's eye, and just their vision, their absolute vision with what they're doing.
100%. No. So there's something I want to touch on today. I want to make sure it gets covered in is that I work with a lot of people when I make my things, and for many different reasons. But it started with my relationship with Garner Britt. And Garner Britt and I met at Arizona State, and he was a year younger than me. And he had gone to the University of Washington up in Seattle, and then he had worked for a couple of years at a high-end metal fab place. And when he got to Arizona State, his metal fab stuff was, so far beyond what a normal college student's abilities were. And I was a better woodworker, and I was teaching him woodworking, and he was teaching me metal fabrication. Really irritating how quickly he became a better woodworker than I was. I never became a better metal fabricator than he was. But we collaborated, and a lot of times I was the designer and he was the engineer. And the chairs behind me, the rocking chair and the other chair called the ExecuGlide. The ExecuGlide was actually a commission from my sister out in Alameda. And we did a table and 8 chairs, and I designed it. And Garner and I came up with the fixtures and did all the bending and everything. And they were the most graceful elliptical curves. When we tried to have people make them later, they never could duplicate them well. It was fascinating. And we delivered that I think it was right at the end of my 3 years at Arizona State. We delivered them out to my sister, and Garry Bennett only lived about 15 minutes from my sister. And he wanted to see the chairs. He knew I'd been working on them for a while. So he came out in the backyard, and I can date this day because Lady Di died Saturday night. This is Sunday morning, the day of her death. And we're out back, and we're hungover because I don't know why, but we decided to watch the news and drink about Lady Di. Not that we were diehard Brit fans, but we were very hungover the next morning. Garry came over about 9 o'clock, came over and saw the chairs, and he goes, Jesus Christ, these are good fucking chairs. I'll take a set. And he ordered a table and 8 chairs.
Oh my goodness.
And so literally that was like one of our first commissions. And to this day, you can be some famous collector and they'll be like, and what do you do? And blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, yeah. Oh, I said, and somehow Gary's name will pop up and I'll say, oh yeah, the yellow chairs in the backyard. And they're like, yeah, we had dinner on them last night. I was like, yeah, those are mine. Oh, wow. We've sat on those a lot. Those are great. It's like how cool that was. But
that's a good nod.
So yeah, it was very, very cool. And when we delivered it to him, he's lovely. Garry was always, he was a friend-tor. He didn't want to be called a mentor, so he was a friend-tor.
Friend-tor. That's good.
But and then the rocking chair was the second line of outdoor furniture we were trying to create. And once we started the first line, we realized we didn't have the capacity, the capital, or any of it. So we just had to shelf this other chair idea, which was a little more traditional looking and had a little more folksiness to it. And many years went by, and at that point, to go back real quick, Brad Miller is a ceramicist, taught at Anderson Ranch a million times, wonderful ceramicist. His website is Brad Miller Rocks. Check out what he does. He's a genius.
Brad Miller Rocks. Okay.
Because he makes rocks is one of the things he makes, but they're not like other people's rocks. But he brought his rocking chair up that had some damage on it, and I laid it on its side, and I traced the geometry on a piece of cardboard. So if you're going to knock him off, get all the information you can.
At least do it honestly.
So years go by, and Sam. I told Sam what I was doing. He goes, "Oh yeah, have at it." And so years go by, and I've got this chair that I think is like, it just needs to be a rocking chair. And Garner was teaching at App State University, and I lived out in Carbondale, Colorado, where I basically live now. And he flew out, and we mocked up a new version of this chair into a rocking chair. And he went back to North Carolina, and he created the first version, and then we unveiled it at Architectural Digest Home Show that spring. And we've probably sold 50 of those now. And it was my idea. It was my first version that him and I worked on. And he took that first version and then made a new chair from it. And we did the double curve of the rocker that is the Sam Maloof signature of his rocking chair. That's the only thing that, other than the carved tractor seat, which is what he carves too, but they're very visually different. And I worked with him forever. And so for years, I'd always be the designer and he'd always be the engineer. And I said, I know you. I saw your thesis show. Your work's so good. Like, what's going on inside that head? I want you to bring one of your ideas next time. So the knuckles are his. They're not mine.
Oh, wow.
He invented that. And he brought it to that year's Architectural Digest, and he brings a little mock-up of it. And I was like, this is genius. It's not eliminating the love of wood, but it's eliminating the joint between mortise and tenon and the weakness that happens when you take something delicate and then mill out all those parts and bring them together. They're not very strong. And then by instead making this metal joint, everything sleeves into extremely strong, still honors wood, but then also creates this other design element that can be patinaed or plated or powder coated. All these directions can go. The table itself can have legs that lean it out, or they can have legs that are straight. You can turn the legs. So you can make them traditional or you can make them contemporary depending on the scale. They were genius. So we're supposed to go back to New York in May for ICFF, and he dies. Yeah, 39 years old, 2012. And so at the time, the rocking chairs were starting to take off. We had something in Architectural Digest and our El Decor and some other write-ups, a Dwell one. And we were having some momentum with those, but I didn't make those. He made those. I can't make those. I'm not that good a metal fabricator. And so I'm now like out there searching for a maker, and I meet somebody in Providence, very good skills, never ended up being reliable, but I'm trying to keep that part of our business going and deal with my grieving. And so like 5 years go by, 4.5 years of that knuckle sitting in my studio. And we all get our press in magazines, and you might get a national one or, a local one or whatever. And I've had nice write-ups and things, bigger magazines. Soper's Sun, based in Carbondale, Colorado, one of the smallest newspapers that I've ever had an article in, wrote about the local maker. And a guy is in a restaurant looking at it, and he calls me and says, I need tables for my new restaurant. And I said, cool. And I walked outside of my studio, and my studio then was like 10 businesses in a row. And you know how you can look at someone's body language, and I'm on the phone. I look down and I said, are you at Silo Restaurant out front? And he goes, yeah, I am. I said, well, turn right and wave. And he goes, what? And I said, well, just turn to the right and wave. And he does. And I wave back, and he goes, okay, I'll be down when I'm done with lunch. And I said, perfect. So he comes down and he says, I'm opening up this new boutique burger joint, and I need tables. And I said, great. When do you need them by? I need them in 3 weeks. How long have you known you're going to have a restaurant? Oh, about a year. How long have you known you're going to have people sit down? Oh, probably the whole time. I was like, should have probably thought about those tables a little sooner. But in the meantime, I had this idea, and I pulled out the knuckle, and I said, this is this metal joint. And he already had a color scheme. He had done patinas, steel patinas that were gun blued, and then he had rift oak throughout it. And I showed him, and he goes, I love this idea. And so we did the whole dining area in these knuckles tables, and that was the first time we had ever put them in to view after sitting on this idea. And so he had created the one idea, and then since then I've taken and created like 12 more joints. And it's A, I know him. It was easy to do that. B, once you see somebody explain an idea, you can take all the steps behind it. Like, once I saw the one joint, I was like, oh, there's like 50 other joints for bookshelves and for chair backs and for benches. And then because we were getting those into hospitality, then it was like, oh, I need a trestle base. Again, the wood would sleeve into the metal. And then, and I just riffed off the whole idea after that. But without him, that idea doesn't happen. And God, he was a good maker, man. He was such a good maker. And he was such a joyful maker. And if he wanted to make a telescope, he ground the lens. And if he wanted to make a plane, he made the Damascus steel. he was fucking hilarious, man. Because he would, and then everything he ever made was about 80% done. And then once he could see it finished, he was good. Like to this day, there's this beautiful table. So his wife is very close with us, and she's a geologist for USGS out in Pasadena now. And she's got this table, and it's this beautiful, like it almost looks like of a clover. So a curve into another curve, and then it flattens into the back wall with two legs. And so it cleated on the back of the piece, and then two legs. And when you open up the drawer, there's no bottom. The drawer is in the shape of it, this clover shape, but there's no bottom in the drawer. And this is totally him.
Because he didn't finish it?
Because he didn't need to finish it. He knew what it looked like. Everything else about it was done. It was gorgeous. All this inlay. I mean, it was, his thesis show was about all the failed astronomy experiments of all the scientists. And so he made these like 10 pieces that were all wrong, beautifully crafted, like a table where you'd crank it and then all the planets would go around the Earth. And just so smart. Such fun work. And so when he wasn't making stuff, I was like, how are you not making things anymore? But to this day, I have 3 guys that work for me. We make the rocking chair now, and it took us a while to get it back in the house. And, you know, I do a lot of the woodworking. I oversee it, but I have 2 guys and one guy works for me, and the other guy comes in and does work when we want to make like this, like we want to make a run of double rockers. He comes in. And it's so fun because they try to figure out what was in Garner's head, and they're so blown away by how good it is and how hard it is. And they've been still to this day trying to figure out how to make the rocker blades the same as he made them. And I wasn't there. I can tell them how to make the Execuglide chair because we made that together. But I didn't get to make the rocker with him because he was in North Carolina and I was in Colorado, and I don't know. And we're trying to extract, and it brings a lot of joy, and it brings a lot of appreciation that they always, you know, I describe him to him, and they're always trying to get in his head and figure out little nuances, but they're like, we love making this piece for you. And it's fun to make with people. It really is.
I have a musician buddy who actually, he died last July 4th of an asthma attack. And I mean, literally like a year ago. And he, in San Antonio, Texas, he's just a crazy heavy metal musician. He's just in love with every second he picked up the guitar. And I listen to his music and I'm like, what the fuck were you doing? It sounds so amazing, but what were you doing with your hands? You know, it's almost like that. Yeah. It's like, you're a genius. How did you do it? Where did it come from? And it did. It came from that organism that is your friend. That is that human on this earth. Yeah. It's like how, why? You did it. I see it. I hear it. But
you know, it's so, like, that's why I go like places like Anderson Ranch and Pinland and Haystack and Appalachian Center for Craft and any of these places, OCAC, any of these places, it's so infectious to go there, and it's so fun, and you get fed. You know, it's amazing at Pinland to, you know, watch the glass blowing at midnight when woodworkers should not be on power tools anymore, but those guys, that's right. That's their segment of time, and it's so fun, and it just feeds you. And it's like having, you know, I give my guys a lot of, I let them have their opinions, and we can argue and we can decide on something, but I like to make with people. And so I don't try to heavy hand it into it's my way only. I'm like, well, let's investigate that. And sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it's a much better idea. And sometimes I'm like, no, because it forgets this. But it's really, and we all enjoy that. And then we're like, and back at it. But I built a shop to share it with people, and I really like sharing it. And then, you know, I get a lot of the Anderson Ranch people, like Leah Ginter is going to come down and do some work for us this fall. She's got a couple solo shows. She's an amazing maker who's making organic things on the CNC. It's so funny because he's making these things that look like mud and she's using paper afterwards. And then her process is such a CNC process. And then I love that. I find a lot of humor in that.
Let's talk about collaborations a little bit, because it sounds like the collaborative process is an important part of your work. And I'm interested in the process of collaboration, because this is a collaboration between Rob and I. Right. And also your wife is a part of Board by Design as well, correct?
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate that.
And you want to mention her name?
Anne Brumby.
Anne Brumby. So Board by Design is a collaboration. How does collaboration work for you? Is collaboration a process where everything's on the table, where people pick their lanes, or is it just sort of a more organic process?
So, Board by Design was founded by me. My wife and I met at Arizona State. She's a jewelry designer. She was a hairstylist. She's really, really amazing jewelry that was water jet, acrylic, and stainless.
I've got some of it here, actually. I got some from you
That's what I thought. I thought you did, Rob.
In 2011, a necklace and some earrings.
And so I don't forget, Rob and I did a collaboration in like 11 or 12 where I make this.
We did.
I make a product called an eyewear rack, and it's just a board with a bungee. And eventually I had them selling at Crate and Barrel, Williams-Sonoma, Urban Outfitters, Pendleton, all these companies. Never made any money from it, but it was good for my ego. But Rob and I, Rob was doing these beautiful drawings on his turned vessels and chrysanthemums and other things. And so he did these drawings on these boards of mine. They were really cool. I kept one of each. So I do have an example of both.
Oh, you do have a couple of them. That's cool.
I have one gear and one chrysanthemum. But they were really cool. But it was kind of fun. It wasn't as much. It was me providing a vehicle for him to do his thing. Because what I always joke, this line of things I made were rectangles that when you put them on the wall did nothing until you set your keys on them or your eyewear on them, and then you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Pretty quiet, pretty boring, pretty practical. But Rob's versions made them a lot more engaging. That's for sure.
Pretty Kernovian.
Yes. Pretty Kernovian, not Sasso-Holian.
And that was fun because you would send me the boards to do it, or I'd get them. I think you sent them to me like drilled and cut, and then I just burn the designs on them and send them back.
Yeah, it was very cool. And that was pre everyone having a laser engraver.
Right. So it was all handmade.
Yeah. So each one was individual, which I love that. So my wife. So I started Board by Design. And that's my sense of humor is, the term Board by Design.
It's a great name.
What
was on what did you have on those first batch of T-shirts or so?
The first ones were Tight Maker, Loose Cannon.
That's it.
That's Garner and I, because we definitely, by the time, we were definitely Tight Makers.
You were the Loose Cannon.
We were, probably, actually. That's probably true. And now our motto is handmade with real hands. And that comes from, I believe, Chipotle, handmade with real avocados. But
thank you, Chipotle.
Yeah, thank you, Chipotle. But so I started it out. But when I work with people, I like democracy, and so I'm usually bringing the idea, but I'm happy to have people weigh in and see it through their eyes, because everyone has things, and I do funny drawings, and I'll go look back at my drawings and see a completely different object a month later or a year later. So I showed my guys drawings, and they'll be like confused by the intersection, and then they'll explain what they think they see, and I'm like, oh, that's better. Let's do that. So I'm probably the designer still. But I let my people be a lot of the engineer. Now, my wife and I's relationship is different. Two things happen. One, I don't listen to her at all, and then she generally says, "Oh, you're right. That was a good idea." That's happened a lot in our history, and she would admit that too. She's like, "Oh, I don't like that at all," and I'm like, "Well, that's how I'm doing it." And then she's like, "Oh, that came out good. I like that." Or with color, she plays a huge part in it. When we're making decisions on color, because I love,
and then she's right.
We just both trust each other's opinion on color, and we try to bring something. I love color. I love, I love wood for the color it is, but I also love steel because you can powder coat it any color. And I love color, but I used to paint and I used to mix color a lot. And once you don't mix it, you're not very good at it. So powder coating is great because those colors are really accurate and really beautiful. And you just point to them and then your shit comes back and it's that color. And you're like, perfect. How great is that?
Damn,
yeah.
That was easy.
Yeah, that was easy. And, and I have a good relationship with the powder coater I like a lot. But it's all collaboration. It's all about listening and communication and relationships and just having and just letting yourself be vulnerable.
Well, that's an interesting perspective because a lot of us spend time in our studios and our main collaborator is ourselves. And we're never gentle with ourselves. We're never kind with ourselves. We're usually hypercritical. And there is something really wonderful about collaborating and, getting in touch with somebody other than yourself or your inner asshole, which is who I have a close personal friendship with. I love the guy. I hate the guy.
I believe you.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like you have a good balance. Like you do stuff. I'm sure you do stuff in your shop by yourself too, but then it's open.
I work on the weekends by myself. I work on the week. I go on this, it's funny because people are always like, you don't have a life or you work too much. And I'm like, we have a business based on our abilities, metal fabrication and woodworking. Sometimes they come to us for our design sense. Sometimes they don't. And it's a big job. Sometimes it's a collaboration. We did a collaboration with an architecture firm where we got a lot of say in the design for the Aspen Art Museum. Super fun project, big project, took a long time. Those are a blast. And those ones get you good notoriety. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes, the job comes in and you're like, we need to take that job because I have 3 employees and I need to make sure that they are paid and fed. And I can dink around with my ideas when my guys are keeping the shop. A lot of the things I want to make, I don't ever care if I sell it or, yes, I'd like to find I need to find a new gallery. But in the meantime, it should not, other than storage, I shouldn't worry about making things. I just want to make them. And then that's the thing that feeds my soul. So it's nice to have people working for me that make sure they feed the bank account when I'm feeding the soul. Is what happens a lot of times too.
So following up on that, as we start to wrap this up, what are the things you are making right now that feed your soul? And what is next on the to-do list for Board by Design?
So on the soul part is that I was saying that we built this dream studio and it kind of ate our life up. Plus, we built a 4,200 square foot building in 6 months for $100 a square foot in Aspen, Colorado. For 2 years, it looked like my wife and I had been running a marathon, literally hands on our knees going, like you'd see us year and a half later, still just broken. And because we had to put so much of our own sweat equity into it. And it worked. It provided with what we wanted. And because of all the things that I tell people, and when you're trying to make stuff, that one of the most wonderful things to have is space. So that as you're working on one idea and you're not sure where to go forward, you can turn to another table and continue on something else, but not have to tear it down or put it away or anything. Because you might come in the next morning and go, oh, got it. Yeah. Because it's sitting there looking at you. And space, it's great to have tools and great to have a great dust collection system, all that stuff. But man, it's sure nice to have space. And we have space now. So I am working on, I had a solo show right before we started building the building. And I had kind of launched a couple new ideas that then I didn't get to go into. But I'm fascinated by palettes. And I really like palettes when they come in and all the different kinds of palettes in the world. So I made line drawings of palettes. And of course, my first instinct is to turn them into furniture because I always think of everything as furniture. And I'm like, how can I get less money? I know, I'll make it into furniture. And
right.
What if this was not functional? No, let's make it functional and charge less. Okay, good idea. So I made these pieces that were basically these kind of like homage to these big chunks of wood where they look like they're sitting on these pallets. And so I've got a couple of those in the work. One has just been posted on Instagram. One I shared with you guys that I haven't posted yet. And then it's been feeding all the other ideas because as I was making the pallets, I was liking them without objects on them. I was really liking looking at the line drawing of the palette, and I'd hang them on the wall and stuff. So then I started playing with clear colored acrylics, like plexiglass. And so now I've gone back to like when I was in college, you'd use a vacuum former or a heat gun, you'd bend Plex. So I'm making these boxes, and I'm in a point where I have to start taking some chances. I've got to what I knew I wanted, and now I need to figure out how to make them cool and engaging. And the idea is to play with color and depth and line drawing, and they're going to be non-functional wall paintings of crates with boxes on them. So I'm working on that. I'm really excited about those. And then on the product design side, because that's like the art side of me, and then the product design, I always play with these pots. So I have these new lamp versions of these pots I've been making for years. And the pots we sell like 5 a year or 6 a year, and they're fun for me to make. And they're all utilizing culinary pots from, like from huge industrial kitchens, or just professional kitchens. So that's on that side. And then I'm trying to play with this plexiglass idea where I bend this piece and I keep failing. I'm trying to make this piece look like a piece of crumpled up paper. And completely non-fun. Cool. And I haven't gotten it there yet, but I'm having a lot of fun failing. And this feels good to me because I haven't made bodies of work. I'm doing the quotation signs, because you come out of art school and you try to make a series that relates to each other. And I have all kinds of styles that I feel are innately mine, but they go in different places. But I'm trying to make 5 or 6 of these few styles so I can figure out what the hell they are. And you know what I mean? And then on the front for us as a business is that we have a great gig with an ice cream parlor chain out of Colorado called Sunday. And we're getting ready to do 2 of their restaurants this fall. And so we do all the tables and displays and their signage and their cone racks, and their ice cream is great. It's an artisan ice cream. They make it every week. If it's your birthday and it's coming up or something, you can literally call them, ask them if they'll make one of their 50 flavors. They'll make it, and then you can have a cake made out of your flavored choices. They're awesome. But they're based out of Vail, and they didn't bling out their Vail and their Edwards location, so we're supposed to do those next. So that'll be fun.
Is that all with Knuckles stuff?
It's Knuckles and the trestle bases for their tables, which is a base we made, and we did like a restaurant out in Healdsburg, California a couple years ago using those.
You were talking about taking chances. It's also known as making mistakes.
Let's say the one last thing: happy accidents.
Happy accidents, yes.
I love that.
That is. I don't know how many things that have ever happened where if you can just step away and breathe through it, and when you walk back in and look at it again, maybe that happy accident made it better.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, wrapping it up.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you guys both. I so enjoyed hanging out with you.
Yeah. Why make?
Why make?
I feel you. We got to make.
Why make?
Why make?
Why make? Why make?
Why make? Why make?
You can listen to Why Make on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can also grab our RSS feed or direct download from our website, why-make.com.
Please help support the Why Make podcast and Why Make Productions by making a tax-deductible donation to us on Fractured Atlas. Visit fundraising.fracturedatlas.org/the-y-make-project or go to the Donate to Why Make page on why-make.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at WhyMakePod.
This episode is recorded on Squadcast and edited by us on Audacity. Thanks for listening.